resource and it will take you straight to our Slido page. While we wait for everyone to join us on Slido, I would like to give a bit of background on today's webinar. Following our last webinar on the 8th of April titled Mindset Shift from COVID-19, we received many questions and inquiries on what business measures can companies adopt to ensure continuity of business operations. The prolonged COVID-19 outbreak situation has direct impact on the ability of businesses within our industry, regardless of its size, to sustain a workforce for the rest of this year. Employers and employees alike are now facing an uncertain future. Our hope is that this forum will provide employers with ideas of what can be done in workforce arrangements in these challenging times. If you are an employee, we hope you will walk away with a better understanding of what you could possibly do proactively to help your company to survive through this unprecedented period. While we are waiting for everyone to join us on Slido, I would like to introduce our panel of experts tonight. We have joining us tonight Mr. Daman Sivalingam, who is an industrial relations lawyer with his own firm, Daman Sivalingam and Partners. Daman is a seasoned employment lawyer with more than 25 years in experience in labor and employment laws and industrial relations. His forte is in finding practical routes for IR initiatives that employers wish to execute. Our other speaker this evening is Mr. Andrew Ng, Regional HR Director, ASEAN of Informa Markets. Andrew possesses 26 years of experience in the full spectrum of human resource management, with 3 years of working experience in Shanghai, China. His professional experience in various PLC and MNC covers diverse industries from B2C to B2B businesses. As the Regional HR Director in Informa Markets, Andrew oversees the entire HR function of Southeast Asia. We are glad that we have both these experienced speakers on board tonight. They are both well-grounded and in tune with what is going on the ground. Now, if you're all ready, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. Let's begin with our first poll question. We would like to find out who we have joining us tonight. Please join us on Slido and answer the question on Slido. We would like to know, are you an employer, employee, self-employed, freelancer, student, academic? Wow, okay, I can see that the numbers are coming in. We'll give it a little bit more time because we can see the numbers going up right now. It's interesting to note that the majority of the people who have joined us tonight are employees. You can see that there are about 77% of us tonight who are employees. And I think I'll let this run a little bit longer because the numbers are coming up. We actually had 400 over people who signed up with us tonight. So I can numbers going up now. So let's keep it going. Okay, I think the numbers are holding steady now. So for our panel of experts tonight, about 80% of them are employees. We have 15 employers. We have a small group of we have some freelancers as well and job seekers. Let's go to our second question. And our second question is, how many people does your company employ? We want to see how many people. Oh, that was fast. Okay, I think everyone's getting the hang of Slido right now because the numbers are coming, the responses are coming in very fast at the moment. And it looks like the majority of us work for the small to medium-sized enterprises, those with 6 to 75 employees. Okay. The numbers are still shifting slightly, but I think we're still holding at SMEs. Okay, well, it looks like we have 54% of our companies which are joining us tonight are small to medium enterprises. So the last question we have for you tonight, I think we're all get started. The last question we have for you tonight is, we want to understand how you are feeling right now. Okay? This is an open question, so you can answer it in one word. The question is really, how are you feeling right now? Go with your gut feeling, overthink it. And it's okay to feel different from other people, because some of us may be feeling sad, some of us may be feeling excited, and it looks like a lot of us are feeling uncertain, because the uncertain word is very, very big there in the center of the screen. Yes, it is uncertain times that we are in right now. And what we're hoping that this question will do is actually to show you that you are not alone, that a lot of us are in the same boat, and what we hope is that we will all get through this together. It's nice to see occasionally some positive words coming up, like hope, positive, challenging, excited. So I think there is hope for us too. Just a little bit of sharing from my side while the responses are coming in very fast now. When the outbreak first started unfolding, I started to feel anxious myself. And when MCO was announced, I admit I went into a bit of a depression. Then one day someone shared a message with me. This message was, how can we add value minus negativity times our effort and divide the stress? When I started to apply this, my outlook changed and I started to look more positive. I hope from today's webinar, you will also start to see that there are possibilities for a better outcome when right now the world seems dark. So to end the poll, I just want to share that it is only when the world is dark, the stars will shine. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in the poll and the interactive session. We are going to get started now. We are going to keep this Slido open, so if you have any questions for our panel of speakers, you can ask your question in Slido. And if you see someone asking the same question which you like, you can actually give their question the thumbs up, and the question will go up in the priority queue for us to answer later. We will now like to move on to the reason why we're all gathered here today. I would now like to begin. I would like to invite Dato' Vincent Lim, President of MASIOS, Malaysian Association of Convention and Exhibition Organisers and Suppliers, to share his thoughts with us. Dato', I invite you.
Thank you, Didi. I think today I think we can see a keyword is uncertain from the Slido survey. Hello, see you all again, and good evening to everyone. First, on behalf of MASIOS, I would like to thank our panelists, Mr. Diamond Sivalingam and Andrew Ng, for being with us tonight to share their insights and expertise for our MASIOS webinar 2.0 on sustainability and resilience in the age of COVID-19, how do employers and employees can navigate together. I also would like to take this opportunity to thank the moderator. I think your team, a fantastic, dynamic team, Didi, Jeannie, our MASIOS Secretariat and her team for organizing this webinar. And I hope everyone will continue to stay at home, stay safe, and enjoy the MASIOS webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no doubt the COVID-19 pandemic has brought a lot of unexpected challenges. And this pandemic has also impacted the business events industry like exhibitions, conferences, events, corporate dinner, corporate trips, incentives, all are affected. And the spillover effect also goes to the hotel, F&B outlets, retail, and transport, and many others. And we foresee it will take some time to recover, and hopefully it might see some recovery sign in Q4, like what we say something in last webinar. But is still uncertain. The keyword uncertain, as we await for the Ministry of Health for the post-MCO guideline. For your information, Martials and Peckham are also in the midst of preparing the post-MCO SOP for the business event industry, such as social distancing guideline, hygiene precautionary measures, and others. Now, when the MCO is lifted, assume I don't know whether by end of the month or early or somewhere somewhere next month, and if this is a 6-month ban on the public gatherings, I think it means the entire business event in Malaysia will be shut down. I think this will be a very serious, will be stopped, and there will be no business events at all for this year. I think this will be a very scary issue, and this will further impact on our industry, and we estimate few thousand business events will be affected. That include like 300 over exhibitions that consider consumer and trade exhibitions, hundreds of conferences that cover included of international and the local conferences and other events. If all this will be cancelled, this will cost a total about 2.4 billion losses to the economy. This figure was our survey, and this is a report. Therefore, about 10,000 over workforce or 10,000 over employee will be affected. So I hope this will not be the bad news for us. And if this happens, many companies will not have any revenue for this year, right? I think it's also very scary. So we hope post-MCO for the mass public gathering ban, hopefully it will be for 3 months if I can. I wish the MOH will consider instead of 6 months, at least during the Q4 for the last 3 months of the year, there is some of the shows still able to kickstart. Now we will observe and implement the new SOP by then that will endorsed by MOH during the show when we kickstart. And so we hope the business event at least can go on and minimize the impact of the industry. I also would like to share some of the info about Germany has also announced that they also ban on the exhibitions until end of August. Same go to China, have been banned for exhibition until further notice. Also the reason Martial also conducted a survey after the Muhyiddin economy stimulus package. We noticed that about 76% of the companies cannot sustain for more than 6 months. Another very scary report, even though this was after the Muhyiddin economy stimulus package. And 79% indicated that the wage subsidy program, instead of 4,000, should increase to 6,000. And 62% stated that they will not benefit from this stimulus package. Now, around the world or in our regions, we also noticed the root recovery action by the industry, whether it's the government or their respective bureau, are already in place. An example like in Hong Kong, that what I know that the venue rental for exhibitions is fully subsidized for their next show. I think that is a very good news. Well, in Singapore, 75% of the worker wages will be subsidized until end of the year. This is another good news from our neighbor. Meanwhile, in Thailand, a total of USD 3.03 billion has been approved to help the BE company that affected by the COVID-19. That is Thailand. So back to Malaysia, our country, we hope MOTEC or myself, please give our bee industry more attention, hopefully to be able to hear the good news in the next stimulus package. Now, the latest recovery plan and recommendation by Marcios, I mean, we have been formed a task force. We've been ongoing for a lot of meetings, even though during the MCO, we've been submitted the Malaysia Business Events Financial Funding Proposal to myself. And we hope the government or myself will seriously consider the recommendation to assist our industry. Now, the public health and the safety is also equally important. Therefore, it is imperative that we have to follow the important guidelines. These uncertainty are beyond our control. We have to go through a new normal or new norm in our day-to-day life and the work. And therefore, we will need for everyone to do their part. Employees and employers must be prepared to ride through this wave. We shall shift our mindset to be more proactive, support each other, and together we overcome this crisis. But all of us must remain resilient and embrace whatever circumstances that may come. The most important thing is to sustain the company or to sustain your business. I think this is another keyword. I hope all the audience were able to remember. To sustain your company, to sustain your business. We might need to make immediate choices, redefine your work, and so on. So we have to get ready to think out of the box or think beyond, to break through, to be more innovative, also to upskill our knowledge and prepare or to go to digital or go online and be prepared for the post-pandemic return to restart our business hopefully very soon. I think everyone is in this uncertainty situation right now. A lot of query, a lot of questions from the employee and the employer as well. That's why today we have two experts will be here. I'm looking forward to hear from them and teach our industry how can we work together between the employee and the employer, work hand to hand and overcome this uncertain scenario. With that, I hand over back to Didi and to start the panel section. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vincent. Thank you for actually highlighting the real situation that we are all facing right now. And it's something that we need to face up. We are all grown-up adults here, so we need to face reality. But what we hope is tonight we will see some options of how we can moderate and for it to move forward together. So our speakers are ready to go. So shall we start with our first question this evening for Andrew? Hi, Andrew. Good evening. Before we start, perhaps I can invite you to say a few words to our guests tonight.
Hi, Didi. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the introductions, Didi. It's good to be here tonight. I heard just now you mentioned that we have 400 over participants tonight. Thanks, everyone, for spending this late evening with us.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, Andrew, I understand that you are leading the COVID-19 Business Continuity Plan implementation in Informa markets. Can you share some of the implementations that have been initiated and the results you have achieved so that we can learn from it as well?
Thanks, Didi. Perhaps I think in this sharing, I hope will also give some guidance, perhaps for some of the participants today, whether you're in the roles of employees or employers. In fact, for Informa markets, we actually started to start planning on the business continuity plan on COVID-19 post right after Chinese New Year. Right? So that was in the beginning of February. I will share with everyone briefly at the local, regional, and global level what informal markets we have actually done. Locally at the country level, across Southeast Asia, right? So what has been done since the month of February, in respective office, we have actually set up a so-called BCP team with a BCP officer locally, right? So each country, the 7 countries, we have each country having this BCP team. And things that has been done could be quite similar to most organizations that have actually done, where we have daily temperature taking of employees. We have this visitor management process where we take their temperature, and there's also this health declaration process. We also have this employee sickness management process where we get employee to feedback through a certain process and we keep track of their well-being. And we also distribute face masks, and we also do the office disinfections, right? So particularly in Malaysia, right, I bring the same to Malaysia, still locally. So the BCP team, in fact, has actually planned on the working from home, or we call it remote working, right? So having team A and team B, alternate week. In fact, we were supposed to start on the 18th of March, and it happens to be the same day where we started the MCO. All right, so the team has been pretty prepared for that. In the last 5 weeks of MCO, each teams are having daily morning call. 3 things that they actually touch on. One is actually the well-being of the team. Second thing is about the internet connectivity at home. And third is about the progress of what they have said they will do previous days and what are the next course of actions that they will do the coming days. So employees are frequently using Microsoft Teams as a communications and collaborations tool. So this has been largely used within informal markets. And we have also since March rolled out quite a number of webinars and also online bite-sized trainings from digitals to even stress management, knowing that this is not an easy time for everyone. At the regional level, which is Southeast Asia level, or we call it ASEAN level, we have since February to early February had this weekly ASEAN COVID-19 project team call. Right? So we discuss on various matters from our people to our exhibitions, event schedules, and things around that too. I will elaborate next a bit more at the global level because most of our measures around COVID-19 was actually very much driven by global, on top of what that I shared with you on local and regional level. So at global level, there is also this COVID-19 committee meeting, and various, we call it business management measures, has been rolled out since early March until today. All right, so much effort has been spent at looking at what are the operating expenses that we can trim down, right, before even we start talking about what are the cost-saving measures around the staff cost or the people cost. All right, so accelerations of digital transformations has also been a huge focus in the recent months. All right, so I will not touch in detail some of those measures we'll be taking because I think we will address that a bit later. To name a few, right, so things that we have been doing is actually recruitment freeze. Most organizations have done that. We have delayed our annual merit increase, which is annual increments, to second half of the year. Travel freeze. We also have offered this 3-month sabbatical program for employees to apply, right? So I can touch a bit later in the subsequent sessions that we have. The global senior group management team has also taken a pay cut, right? Our global CEO he's taking a pay cut of 33%, while the other board members are taking a pay cut of 25%. So that actually happens last month, and until now, I think it still stay at that level. We have also other measures that we have taken recently where there's this, we call it annual leave acceleration, right? So we encourage and we get our peoples to utilize and to take their leave as much as possible in the first half of the year. All All right, so that's also with the view that second half of the year, I think when things are easing down, when we can actually organize trade exhibitions, I think everyone will be very busy. Okay, so I mean, with all these business management measures, there's a lot of transparency and communications are taking place. All right, so that is through the online town hall sessions that's being organized globally from time to time with our global group CEOs sharing with employees. Right, so that usually take place at the late night, allowing global employees to join, and employees are given opportunities to ask questions too, right? So there's a lot of interactions and clarity around that. And our CEOs has also on few occasions through his weekly emails mentioned all these measures taken. I think, and he has specifically mentions that, all these measures are taken with the aim that eventually is that we want to avoid as much possible coming to the situations of retrenchment and layoff of employees. Right. So I think, in fact, I think it was very encouraging. Whether if I look at the experience in the last 5 weeks, personally, I've even heard from our employees in different countries in ASEAN talking about how they want to help to contribute to the company in this very difficult period of time. Right. I think all those ideas and suggestions that they are giving pretty much around how they want to help in terms of trying to flatten the curve, our cost level. All right, that some of them even volunteers that they can even go for pay cuts and things like that. All right, so in summary, I think a lot of focus has been placed in the last many weeks to communicate on key messages to employees, to communicate all these key messages to our employees in the timely fashions, conducting scenario planning exercise, using assumptions over assumptions, right? Conducting rigorous cash flow projections and cash flow planning exercise too. All right, so that's all from me.
Thank you, Andrew. Daman, would you like to take over from here?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Didi and Andrew. Nice to be on this webinar this evening. And thanks to Masios. I hope we'll be able to share some insights that may be helpful to all the people who are logged in today. Didi, you're saying, I just wanted to add a little thing that Andrew talked about. I think Andrew's company had the very beneficial aspect of planning or being prepared for it. In fact, they were supposed to start on the 18th of March, which couldn't have been better timing. But I would like to say that I think 95% or more of employers probably didn't have that benefit.
Yes, and I agree with you, Daman. I, for one, was starting to plan as well, but then the MCO was announced before I could implement anything. So the first 2 weeks was kind of a big turnaround for the whole team. So Daman, as an IR lawyer, you must have been very busy the last 5 weeks since the start of MCO. Can you share with us some of the common inquiries that you received from the companies out there who have contacted you?
Okay, and you're quite right to say, Didi, that I will have to give you my experience from an employer perspective. I represent employers, but I think we can sort of connect the dots on how this would impact upon employees. And I'll break it up into three blocks. The first MCO 2 weeks, right? The two burning questions in most employers' minds were, number one, can I operate or not operate? Right? So the issues about essential services. And then there were a lot of SMEs which were providing integral services to an essential service. So I give you an example. So like petrol station operators, essential service, but they have outsourced the cleaning of the petrol station to a company which on its own is not an essential service, but it would follow that if they can't clean the petrol station as an essential service can't operate. And because there was a lack of clarity, that first 2 weeks, people were making inferences. So if I'm an outsourced company cleaning petrol station, I just, as the leader of the company, I made a call. I'm essential. carry on working. So some employees didn't buy into that. Some employees, because there was such an information overload, who can work, who cannot work. There was an issue around employees saying, no, I shouldn't be asked to work. Those issues were the first burning question for that first 2 weeks. The next one, from an employer perception, for the first 2 weeks was, if I can't work, if I can't operate, do I have to pay wages? Right? So that was the burning question for employers who couldn't operate and who couldn't ask the employees to work from home. Right? So they typically tend to be the smaller employers, and so they don't have the liberty of large cash reserves. So the biggest question is, do I have to pay, or don't I have to pay? And from an employer perspective, they are going, but if the employee can't come to work because of MCO, surely I don't have to pay. But the Ministry of Human Resource had put on their website FAQs which said, you cannot force someone to go on annual leave, you cannot force someone to go on unpaid leave, you must pay full wages during this period. So that was the burning question for the first 2 weeks. When the MCO was extended, then I think the issues around wages, people had to make a call. Some got it right, some didn't get it right, and I think that was really driven by survivability. I don't want to judge any employer. There might be some employers whose reserves are so thin they literally live on a month to month, and they may not have had the cash to pay for March salary, so they made decisions that they had to, given their circumstances. When it moved to the next 2 weeks, and when the stimulus packages started coming in, the focus shifted onto, what can I get as an employer? What are the packages that I can apply for to help me sustain myself? And the two main ones there was the ERP, where employees who are on unpaid leave, the employer can apply for 600 ringgit and then pass it on to the employee. The other one was the wage subsidy, and again, the rules for that changed. But the wage subsidy allows employers to claim from the government between 600 to 1,200 ringgit per month for 3 months if they meet certain conditions. But it doesn't apply to everyone. I think that talked about it earlier. 4,000, it was the cap. So that was the second part. So people started looking at what I can get. And when the MCO, and I think it was good that the MCO was extended, the third part, very early, there was a lot more notice. And this is where I think I like the word that you have used, that for resilience. Human beings are a resilient animal. When we started to realize that this is, after the third week, we're going to go into 6 weeks, I think largely a lot more calm started coming in. I mean, we weren't happy, right? But more calm in the sense that people had gone through the range of emotions. Didi, you said earlier how anxious you were. I think you probably were in the 99% of employers. That's the first thing that happens, because it's never happened before in the history of the world. The whole world suffering like this at the same time. But subsequently, and I'd like to stress on what Andrew said. He talked about the rigorous cash flow projections, the rigor about looking at business. What's the future looking like? Some guesstimates have negative, deflated projections. So business owners started doing that. And when that started happening, and when you go through in your mind the range of cost-cutting initiatives you can take into place, the range of stimuluses that you might be able to apply for, you have a little bit more comfort as to, or some visibility as to, how long you can sustain, and that gives you a little bit more peace given the current circumstances. So for me, the experience in the last 5 weeks has been in that 3 batches, and I'd like to think that today most employers kind of feel that there's going to be an extension to the MCO, but because they've relooked at their numbers, they've relooked at the causes that they can take, they've relooked at the options, they probably are in a position that, okay, if it gets extended to the middle of May or to the end of May, what do I do and when? So there is a sort of roadmap in people's, business owners' heads. And when you have a roadmap, as uncertain as it is, you sort of know, okay, this is the trigger point. If that happens, I know what to do. And if it doesn't happen, great, positive. We have upside from there. So that was sort of my experience in this 5 weeks, and very tough because the rules kept changing. Ministry of HR, I don't want to blame them. New government. Can you imagine? Just 2 weeks before the MCO, we had a new government. So you wanna? How about that for a kicker? As it is, it's a first time in the history, and now we're doing this on the back of a new government. So tough times. So there's a lot very unclear. Communication was not consistent from one ministry to another, and don't forget we live in the social media age. So employees have all the information out there, and if they're getting some piecemeal information which is inconsistent with some information they're getting from another source, then issues around can I trust my employer comes in, and then employers had to withstand that. So that's really my experience over the last 5 weeks.
Thank you for sharing, Daman. You know what? I feel a lot more relieved and a lot better after hearing what you've just said, because it's good to know that I'm not the only one in the boat. Because a lot of times, as an employer, you feel like you're the only one that knows what you're going through, because there's always that distance between the employer and the employee. And a lot of times we are told that as the company leader, we are not allowed to share our worries and insecurities with our team and our employees. But I think this current pandemic situation, the current economic situation, has somehow stripped away all that, and is left all of us very vulnerable. And it might be that one of the best way to approach this is actually to be honest and to show our vulnerability to our employees. And hopefully somewhere along the lines we can meet together. And as the theme of our webinar today, how do we work together? So that brings us very nicely to our next question, which is in this downtime, it's actually a challenge for business leaders to find a balance between business continuity and our operating expenses. And staff costs is a major part of our operating expenses. So organizations, employers like myself, we are grasping for ideas on what we can and cannot do to help to manage our costs at this point in time. And the last thing we want to do is to lay off our staff or start staff retrenchments. So Andrew, maybe I can go back to you first, and maybe together with Daman, you can share your input with all of us. What are the few options that companies can consider before we finally have to resort to staff retrenchment or layoff, which is something that we all don't want to do?
Thanks, Didi. I'd like to continue a bit from what Dharman mentioned just now. Right? I think on the last extensions of the MCO, in fact, we see, which is different from the first two MCO period, the PM has actually laid out a little bit of guidelines and opened up the door for employers and employees to discuss. Right? Pretty much what he was actually saying is that as long as mutual discussions came to that understanding and decision, right, they can actually come to certain decisions, right? So that has actually eased out a little bit, plus the employee retention programs, plus the wage support programs that was actually being rolled out at the same time. Today, I think the topic today is about employees and employees navigate this crisis together. So we would not talk about ERP, we would actually not talk about WSPs and the technical part about how to go about applying that, because there's a lot of resources out there will give you a lot of clarity and having that FAQ too. So it's about the topic today is about we are all in this together, right? So the approach that we've taken in this webinar is not to focus on what's legal or what's not. Of course, I think we have seen from the 20 over questions that we have received when you have actually registered. So some of those we would actually address this as we are going through in this webinar too. And I mean, if I look at the recent studies, I mean, 2 out of 3 employees are worried about their job securities. And I've just seen yesterday on the survey results that published by FMM, right, Federations of Malaysian Manufacturers. 4 out of the manufacturing companies are thinking to lay off about 1/3 of their workforce in the next few months, right? So that shows how critical are them, right, where they have actually stopped operations for so long, right? And I think I also want to bring out, there was also another report that I've actually seen from the Malaysian Associations of Hotels, MAH, that was published on last Monday, 13th of April, have actually clearly also indicated some of the stimulus plan, ERP, WSPs, and also efforts that MAH has been actually taken. So I think for those, because I understand some participants today have a huge numbers coming from the hotel industry. So if you guys have not seen that, I would suggest that you take a look at that report. So, I mean, all companies know what options are available to reduce staff costs. I think the approach that I would encourage all of us to think is the different options on short to long term, right? Depending on the different business scenarios. There could be a hybrid or combinations of different cost saving measures taking place even at the same time. Well, I think we talked about it just now in the recruitment phase. I think most organizations would have done that. Clearing of annual leave, right? So next, I think is the pay cut, right? So we have also seen questions from our participants, right? When you have actually registered, you have actually asked, let me see, you have actually asked, can we enforce a pay cut without waiting for the approval from authorities? And what's the process that we should go about it, right? So I perhaps I would like to invite Darman to comment on these questions that we have received. Yeah, Darman, please.
Okay. I'd like to start the available options by a guiding principle that I think is important for everyone to know. If you look at the government, they brought in stimulus packages. Now notice they use the word stimulus. What does that mean? It is to stimulate the economy. Now to stimulate the economy, you need to have as much money in as many pockets as possible. So this is a time where I think again the topic is really important. It's sustainability and resilience, meaning to say we now need to sustain ourselves, and that is possibly going to mean everyone has to take a bit of a hit. And I'm a little bit, sometimes I find, and again I don't want to judge. I've heard from some of my clients that employees refuse to come to work. These are for essential service providers. They refuse to come to work. Or I've heard about employees who say, no, I don't want to take my annual leave. you know um, let's just think about this aspect for a while. Yeah, see, part of the stimulus package is you have a moratorium on your housing loans, your car loans. You have some reduction in your electricity bills. You have some reduction in your internet bill. Now, if I am as an employee, I'm going to say, hey, nothing changes for me as far as my terms and conditions are concerned. I don't care. I want it to be the same. That would put that employee in a better position during COVID than it was during MCO, than it was otherwise, because now I get all my salaries, 6 months moratorium, cheaper TNB bill, cheaper internet bill. I think there's a little level of unfairness there. So I'd like to start by saying the guiding principle here is everybody needs to take a haircut. I would also like to say another guiding principle is, sure, and I think Andrew explained it, in his company, the senior guys took a bigger cut compared to the lower guys. So that's another guiding principle. When you talk about cuts, I'm not saying that the cuts should be the same. People who are of a higher living standard should take a bigger cut compared to those lower. Business owners who enjoyed more during the good times need to now take a bigger cut compared to their employees. So having said that, and I think Andrew spoke about some of the tools, basically you have on one end the best case scenario where an employer says, whether you work from home, don't work from home, however long the MCO, I'm going to keep everything as is. That's for the really rich, deep pocketed employers. Not many of those around. And then, of course, on the absolute worst end is, I'm going to terminate people's services. I'm going to retrench. And to me, that goes against stimulus packages. That goes against stimulating the employee. So the sweet spot is going to be in between. And in between this space, Andrew spoke about annual leaves. Andrew spoke about taking a pay cut. You can have Andrew also talked about a hybrid. You might use a pay cut for some group of employees, annual leave for other group of employees, maybe a bit of unpaid leave for some group of employees. reduced reduced work hours corresponding to a reduced salary. So there's a whole range of these options, and you got to choose the tools that makes best sense for your business. And I would like to hope that employers will also be fair in choosing these tools, being conscious that the lower level employees, a bit more support is needed. So let's not go too hard, too chronic for the employees who are not earning as much as the others. So those are some of the broad guidelines I will say for that, for this question.
Thanks, Darman. I believe most companies would actually be looking at a pay cut as a common measure at this point of time. So, following what Darman mentioned, I mean that pay cut can be in the tiered manner. At the same time, it may also come with a reduced number of days of working, right? And if we look at, I was reading at the MAH that survey reports on this COVID-19. I mean, in the hotel industries, the salary cost takes up between 25 to 32%, all right, of the entire operating cost of the company. And in this case, while we actually look at now in terms of the revenue would have dropped drastically, and then the percentage of this as the total cost of the company would have also have increased a lot. Hence, in this case, most company would actually look at this as one of the quick measure. But other measures, I think, Darwin and I, we have also discussed other measures. For example, I think the unpaid leave, right, the sabbatical leave. What I've shared earlier on what in our company would have actually practiced that, we open for employees to apply, right? So this could be options of voluntary. This could also be options that employers enter into discussions, looking at certain specific functions, certain specific roles that is actually less busy now, right? Having that discussion. And what in informal markets we have actually practiced, which I quite like it. While we say, okay, you apply April, May, June, 3 months that you go on unpaid leave, right? And during this period of time, all benefits, whether it's insurance and other benefits that we have, you will still be getting that, right? There will be no proraters, whether it's your annual leave and things like that. But how we arrange that is actually that on the April, May, June, you still get half a month pay, right? So when you come back in July, August and September, you get half month pay from there. So instead of you don't get paid at all in that 3 months of sabbatical leave, you actually get half a month pay, right? So these are certain things that I would actually encourage everyone to actually look at, because we also need to care and concerns about the commitments that our employees are actually having. All right, and we also, Daman, we also have questions that we have actually received earlier, also about unpaid leave, right? That question is around if we have a small group of employees who refuse to take unpaid leave, what can the employer do? Yeah.
Okay. Very good question. Now, to me, and it's slightly gray area. To me, if a majority of employees, and the larger the majority, the better. If a large majority of employees have agreed to it, um, I would turn it around and say that those who didn't agree to it probably look like they're more unreasonable. Yeah, that's number one. But what happens if now the employer says, I've got 85% who have agreed to it, and so I'm going to implement? What is the balance 15% going to do? They can lodge a complaint with the labor department. In my opinion, given the circumstances that we are in today, the situation of the uncertainty of the COVID, how it's going to impact business, the fact that the company socialized and discussed and communicated with employees, asked them to vote, and got a very strong majority, would weigh very much against the employees complaining. And I would also like to say that if that employee complains, walks out on constructive dismissal, and I don't want to go too legal, but if it ends up in the industrial court, I'm very, very sure actually that an industrial court would say that the employee was actually being unreasonable given the circumstances. Of course, all of this is premised on the company's financial situation being in bad state. If the company has got $250 million in its reserves, then you don't go in with unpaid leave, lah. I'm saying that if all of that is true, I would like to think that the employee is unfair or unreasonable, which is why earlier when I started, I think this is the time we have to be a little bit flexible. We need to be a little bit selfless. Yes, employers may have to be more selfless than employees, but it cannot be selfless one side, selfish the other side. Either way.
Okay, Daman, I
Thank you.
believe we all agree that, I mean, both the employers and employees has to be reasonable. My thoughts is also around this unpaid leave, right? Assuming we saw some of the questions coming in earlier when our participants registered in the events, right? If this COVID-19 situations, right, continue until the end of the year, or where we could not organize any of our events or exhibitions at all, what could people do? So assuming if the companies embark on this no pay leave, right, slightly longer than 3 months, and let's say for example 6 months, can we give an options to the employee, right, saying that okay, in these 6 months you are still considered to be employee of our organizations. It's just that we will not be able to sustain your pace and things like that. And we allow you to go to the market to find other means of employment, right, other means of incomes. How would then the employers, or perhaps some of them would think, oh, can I have at the same time being employed by two different organizations, right? Yeah.
Very good question, Andrew. And I think, I think where Andrew's coming from, the general rule in law is that there is a rule against dual employment. But in my opinion, the general rules go out the window in the current situation. I think it is a little bit too much to ask an employee to be on unpaid leave for such a long period and also restrict his opportunity to earn income to sustain himself. So I think that if the employee if the employer is hopeful that after 6 months business is going to turn around, and he wants to be able to retain this employee because these employees know the business and they can hit the ground running, but it's just that he can't afford any salaries for 6 months. I think a bit of flexibility has to come in there. Perhaps you might build some rules around, please don't go and do work for my competitor, do work which is against the interests of the company. Those kind of rules you can come in. But if someone is a designer, for you to say you can't do grab, you can't do one of these kind of gig job, that's really unfair as well. So you need to find a win-win, and I think what Andrew suggests is a win-win. I think you shouldn't go too hard during these times.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Sorry to jump in. We have quite a lot of questions coming in from Slido, and we are a bit behind time, probably because of a slight glitch on my end just now. So perhaps is it okay if we move on to the next question and take some questions from the audience?
Maybe just a point to add, last point to add, Didi. One of the options that company can actually look at, because we know that organizations are not hiring at this stage of time, right? And
That's true.
organizations are still having vacancies, and there could still be people leaving the organizations that would lead us to certain vacancies that we are having. So one of the options that whether it's employees or the company can actually look at is the redeployment and reassignment of employees, right? So those are on temporary basis. Someone in certain roles or certain functions that we may have access capacity because of COVID-19, then we can move this role to the persons to another functions or another role. And this is on the temporary measures. So this is quite an easy one that can actually be done. Maybe just a quick questions, because we saw also a few questions from the participants around, okay, how do we go about temporarily layoff, right? So this is a question from Talbot.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like, without going to technicalities, I would look at that as temporary layoff is actually the same thing as a temporary period of unpaid leave. So the same thing applies. Speak to your employees, tell them why you have to do this, explain clearly, and hopefully they come on board. And you can't make it such an unreasonable period of time as well. And don't put in restrictions of no second work if it's so long.
Okay.
Thanks, Didi. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. I think there were a lot of ideas that have been shared. I, for one, would like to go back and re-listen to that segment again, the answers to that questions, because there's a lot of notes there that as an employer I can take down and go back and consider for my own company as well. So moving on to the next question, and this is more for the perspective of the employees or the job seekers. Quite a few of them actually sent us a message and asked us if how can employees or job seekers stay relevant in this challenging employment market? So perhaps Andrew, yeah.
Well, I think it's we are fortunate if we are still being employed. So to the employees, my advice is actually that we go above and beyond of what our duties call for it. Right? We need to show extra miles, do extra miles, and show the values that we are contributing to the organization in a very difficult time of this. And we need to stay agile and flexible in taking on different responsibilities and duties. Right? And this is also the time that I think while we are in employment, there are loads and tons of webinars nowadays is available out there. We can actually upskill ourselves and learn something new, right? To the job seekers, I think perhaps I also see that the demographic, we also have some of those who are graduates or undergraduates. Find out, I think first thing first is find out the sectors or the industries are still hiring. Right? So while we are MCOs, there are certain other industries are really doing very well. And the second one is actually be creative in the ways that you market yourself. Right? I'm saying here not to apply for a job, and I'm not saying that you can't apply for a job, but how you market yourself. Right? So I was looking through the LinkedIn yesterday, and I actually saw, all right, there is this recruiter, and she actually put out there this tagline: "Recruiter is seeking to be recruited." Right? So it's a very eye-catching tag. And I've also personally seen candidates who are applying for a job, they wrote some things about themselves in their LinkedIn page, right? And that was very appealing, and there was a lot of hits, and even recruiters, companies are also asking this person, okay, can you drop me a CV? So this is what I meant, and while we have been looking at for years, we talk about future ways of working, right? And we as a job seekers, you just need to be flexible. In fact, I was actually looking at, I mean, because companies are looking into cost saving. In this case, that they potentially they will offer you a fixed term contract or temporary assignments or even a part-time engagement, right? A few days works, things like that, right? So Daman just now mentioned about the gig economy. And in times like this, gig economy will come into a faster pace than ever, right? So in short, not to be picky, the objective is actually get into the job market, right? So your value, I believe, while you may be starting low in terms of your income, I think your value eventually will be appreciated by the company.
Yep. Thank you.
If I can
Mr.
chime in,
Daman?
the only thing I'd add, Andrew made all very relevant points. Perhaps one short term focus for job seekers or employees is try to be as close as you can to the revenue and or cost supply chain, where you can do things which is going to positively impact revenue and or do things which is going to reduce your cost. You will be seen as a value for any organization.
Thank you. Those are very, very relevant points that you've both shared, and even something that, as an individual, doesn't matter that I'm an employer today, but as an individual, a lot of the points that you shared is also very relevant in my position when I look at my position and the value that I provide to my clients as well, to the business clients too. So a lot to take note of there. Okay, looking at our Slido screen right now, there are a few questions here that we will not take for this particular panel because this panel is all about employers and employees. But we understand that these questions are important to our members of Marcios and our attendees. So we will reply these questions on our Facebook page within the next 24 hours. Okay, so looking at the popular questions here, what is the status of discussion with MOH as to guidelines for events? We will address that question on Facebook. Okay. The next question, what is the initiative plan that Marcios is working on as a representative of this industry, myself, Motag, etc., will also be discussed on Facebook page. Okay, so the next one is the next question here. How can employees contribute to the employers during this challenging period to sustain the company and at the same time keep their employment going? I think we addressed a fair bit of this in the previous question, but is there anything you want to add to our colleague here who is just put his, I think his name is Ravi.
I think we covered that
Yeah,
thoroughly just.
we covered that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've covered it, huh? Okay, all right. Well, I think a lot of the questions here we've already covered it earlier. So since we are running short of time, we will try and respond to these questions on Facebook. My apologies to our viewers because we really have only 1 hour, and the feedback from the last webinar was try not to go over time. So to go back to our last question, we want to wrap up shortly. So for those questions we didn't get to answer, we will answer your questions on Marcel's Facebook page. So I thank you for your understanding and patience here. So Daman and Andrew, as we wrap up, I would like to invite you to share any final closing advice to both our employers and employees out there.
Daman, you want to go first?
Okay. I think from the employer's perspective, I would like to stress on leadership. Leadership means having a strong strategy in place. I get it, it's unclear, but you got to crack your brains. What do you think you're going to do? How you're going to face it depending on what happens? Have various projections. Leadership also talks about communicating with your people in a transparent, honest, treat people with dignity, respect. I think the leadership requirements during this period really comes to the fore. From an employee's perspective, you need to be a little bit more selfless. I hopefully you are invested in the business of you see the business as part of you. You want for the business to stay alive as much as the business owner. That's what really I like to stress from the employer and the employee.
Andrew, any last words of wisdom?
Well, I think in times like this, I will agree with Diamond, whether employees or employees. I touch on the job seekers and employees, so I'll touch a bit on the employers. Employee experience actually takes the center stage in this crisis. There's actually a saying, it is not what you say, but what you do to make the people feel. So there's no better time than now in terms of to step up in leadership, like what Daman said, to build a cohesive team, to strengthen the employee engagement, and in this case, communications, right? So organizations actually needs to create a culture that we are all in this together. Clarity of communications, again, I want to repeat what Daman mentioned, is extremely key. The timely messages and bring forth about the long term, I think will be the best approach, right? So communicate, communicate, communicate. And whatever we do now in this crisis would have a long-term impact on our employee experience, the talent retentions and attractions. So in Informa, we believe that taking care of our teams and people well-being would determine to the extent which each one of them will care for our customers and for each other. In the recent months, we have witnessed many senior leaders are leading with empathy and kindness. Personally, to end this, from my experience, we shall exhaust all possible measures and options before coming to a decisions on retrenchment. A decision of such in crisis like this is actually very painful on both sides, but it should be taken very carefully. My own rule of thumb from many experience in the past years is that laying off or retrenching one person, right? It's not about just that person. It's about their livelihood. It's about their confidence. And it affects not only these persons, but 2 to 3 persons who are depending on this person. All right. With that, I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daman, and thank you, Andrew. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have gone a bit over time. So with that, we thank you for joining us this evening and for participating in our poll, questions, and webinar. We hope you learned something from today's webinar. And if you have any more feedback or questions, please continue to ask us. And if you've enjoyed our session, please like us on Marcial's YouTube account called Marcial Secretariat. Thank you once more and good night.
Thanks, Didi.